Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon. Thanks so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. Today, we are not going to be breaking down game film. We are going to be taking a look at day one of CDL Paris. Just a quick note, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be taking one of these matches. I'm going to be breaking it down in length on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/IconNationYT. So make sure you go follow me there as we will break down an entire series, whichever one is usually the closest, right? If there's a blowout between New York and OGLA, maybe I won't do that one, but if it's close between London and Empire, which I probably think it will, that might be the one that we do. So as we hop into this breakdown today, I'm just going to start again 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I upload this previewing the day ahead. So Saturday morning, I'll break down what happened in Friday and predict what's going to happen on Saturday. Same with Sunday morning. Break down what happened in Saturday, predict what's going to happen on Sunday. So for today, the very first day, the Friday of each of these tournaments is just the 4 preliminary matchups in group play. So we're going to start here in the top left-hand corner with Paris versus Florida. So when it comes to this, there's a few things. Again, if this was on LAN, we might be thinking about this a little bit differently because we'd have the travel time. It's overseas. It's in Paris. But when you look at what Paris has done recently, I just don't see what gets people or what could possibly get people excited about them, right? So the last tournament that they played was at CDL Seattle. They started off with the 3-1 loss to Chicago. They then went on and they lost in the losers bracket 3-1 to OGLA. They were out. 0-2. They were completely out. They only won 2 maps the entire tournament. Series before that, which was CDL Florida, they played Atlanta first. They lost 3-1. They did end up winning the domination, even though it was super close. But then in the losers bracket final, they played OGLA again, lost 3-0. So another tournament where they went 0-2. The tournament before that, which was CDL Dallas, they beat Seattle when Seattle was by far the worst team in the league. Then they lost to Chicago. Then they lost to Minnesota. They were out. So as of late, what has Paris done? They beat Seattle like 6-7 weeks ago. But other than that, I don't have anything about them that's making me excited. Whereas if you look at Florida, we know that they just went 4-0 at CDL Minnesota and they won that. Before there, we all remember that they went 0-2 match count, 0-6 map count to lose CDL Florida, even though a lot of those maps were super close. But they're kind of hot and cold, right? That's the story for Florida. And then before that was another tournament they won. It was CDL Dallas. They started off with the loss against Ultra 3-2. Then they beat LAG 3-1. They beat Ultra to redeem themselves 3-1. They beat Chicago 3-1. Then they beat Minnesota 3-1. So 2 of their last 3 tournaments, they've gone on and been victorious in. So just based off of recent history alone, that's going to go ahead and give me the confidence to put Florida through and put Paris down into our losers bracket. After that, we're going to move ahead, and this is a matchup I cannot wait for. So just this last tournament was the first time we've really seen a revitalization from London, because up until this last tournament, which was CDL Seattle, they were kind of looking a little bit down, right? So at Seattle, they came out of the gates. They beat LAG 3-2. After that, they beat New York 3-0, which was a big upset to me just because New York had been playing so well. They looked fantastic. Then they came back. They beat OGLA 3-2. Again, that was a really impressive win because OGLA, as of late, has just looked, I don't want to say phenomenal, but they've looked really good, right? They've shown that they can hang in with the top teams, but maybe they don't quite have enough to beat those teams yet. And then they eventually lost to Chicago in the championship, but that was a really good run. However, before there, they beat OGLA at CDL Florida. Then they lost to Atlanta. And then they lost to OGLA. So they won one series there before they got bounced. And before that, which was CDL Chicago, they lost 3-0 to Atlanta. And then they lost 3-1 to Huntsman. So it really is, 2 of the last 3 tournaments have looked really bad, but the last one they looked really surprising in. So I'm interested to see if they can continue that. But moving on, let's talk about Chicago. Or not Chicago. Let's talk about Dallas, who they'll be playing in the first round. So Dallas at Minnesota, they came out of the gates, they beat Rocker 3-1. Then they ended up losing to FaZe. After that, they beat Surge 3-0, which is a good Surge team that almost beat Atlanta, right? It feels weird to even say those words in the same sentence, good and Surge, but they've been playing good as of late, before finally losing in the semis to Florida at 3-2. Again, it was really close. A lot of the maps were close. It took Florida to win a round 11 in order to beat them. So Empire looked good in their last outing. The one before that, they went 4-0, which was CDL Chicago, won that event. Before that, they beat LAG at Dallas. They beat Toronto at Dallas, and then they ended up losing to Minnesota. But that was kind of like a stumbling block for them. And then the one before that was LA, so CDL LA. And we all know that was the last LAN event, and they ended up winning that one as well. So just as of late, as a whole, Empire has been playing really well, but so has London based off just their last event. I wish that London would have played recently because it does seem like it's been a little while since we've seen them, but I just feel like over the last couple months, Shotzi and Illy and Huke, they're really starting to come into their own. The last event, the vets for Dallas didn't really play all that well. Crimsix and Clayster had a relatively poor event for what they've been doing throughout the entire year. But with this one, I think I'm going to go against the grain a little bit, and I'm going to put London through. They've looked so good. I wouldn't be shocked if Dallas ends up winning this, but I don't know. There's just something that has me thinking that London's going to come out with their new roster that's been performing really well. They've been scrimming really well as of late, and I think they're going to get this victory. So in Group A, I have Florida beating Paris to move on. I have London beating Dallas. Dallas will probably make its way pretty easily through the losers bracket from there. And same with London, right? If London loses, they're going to make it through against Paris also. Maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself and talking about tomorrow, but that's how I feel with Group A. As we move over to Group B, this is another one that I think is going to be really tight. So as of late, again, a lot of people have been really high on New York. So when it comes to CDL Seattle, they beat Seattle, which it's a decent win, but again, that wasn't when Seattle was playing at their best. After that, they got blanked. They got 3-0'd by London, which really took people by surprise. Then they beat LAG. Then they lost to Chicago. So if you're thinking about back to CDL Seattle, this was the last time that we saw New York, and they beat Seattle and LAG, who were clearly two of the worst teams in the league. And they got beat pretty handedly by London and Chicago, who has been playing really well as of late. So when it comes to their most recent, it hasn't really been all that great. But when it comes to CDL Florida, they beat Toronto, or they lost to Toronto 2-1 to start that. Then they came back and they beat Florida. Then they beat Minnesota, who both were playing really well at the time before eventually losing 3-2 in the championship there to Atlanta. So New York is one of those teams that's been up and down, but oddly enough, OGLA has been the exact same way, right? They've had some super impressive events as of late, and then they've had some events where they probably should have played a little bit better. So if we're looking at their last event, CDL Seattle, they lost to Minnesota, and then they beat Paris, and then they beat Minnesota, and then they ended up losing 3-2 to London in the semifinal. So they made it to a semifinal, but that's the one where London beat them 6-1 in the Gunrunner Search and Destroy, and they made it to that tournament. Before that, this is where they made their run, right? So at CDL Florida, they lost to London 3-2, again, a super close matchup. Then they beat Legion 3-0. Then they beat London 3-0. Then they beat Toronto 3-2. Then they had their opportunity to beat FaZe. They had their opportunity. That was the one where they had the opportunity to go up 2-0, but TJ ended up failing in that round 11. So it was 1-1, and then from there, FaZe just really took control after that. So the tournament before that, Chicago, they were 0-2. They got beat. And before that tournament where they made the final against Atlanta, OGLA looked really bad. So when you're looking about as of late who has been playing better, I just feel like everybody is so high on New York, but I'm going to take OGLA in this one. I just have a little bit more confidence in how they've been competing as of late. That last tournament for New York really kind of set them back for me. I felt like, okay, New York is there. They're about to take a turn in the right direction. They're going to show everybody that they should be in their top 5. And then they lost to London. They lost to Chicago. The only 2 teams they beat were Surge and Gorillas. So I think this will be a close matchup, but I think New York will end up winning. And then the last one, OGLA will end up winning. And then the last matchup here, Atlanta versus Toronto. One thing I want to say about Toronto before we get into this is that as of late, Toronto's been looking really good, right? So even though at CDL Minnesota, they lost 3-2 to LAG, who just had a renaissance and had been playing really well. Then they lost 3-0 to Chicago. But before that, when they beat New York 3-1, and then they came back and they beat Minnesota 3-1. This was CDL Florida. Then they came out and they played OGLA really tight before they ended up losing. That was really the first time that we saw a glimmer of hope from Toronto. But when you're playing against FaZe, that just isn't going to be enough. So Atlanta's going to go through just based off of how well they've been playing as of late, even though they lost in their last championship to Florida. But still, their last event, which was CDL Minnesota, they beat Seattle, they beat Dallas, they beat LAG. All of those teams had been having a really good tournament before finally losing, and losing pretty handedly, I must say, to Florida. The one before that was the event that they went 4-0 and they won. It was CDL Florida. They beat Legion. They beat Royal Ravens. They beat New York. They beat OGLA. Even though they didn't have the toughest of competition there, that's another event that they ended up winning. So I think that this could be another matchup when it comes down to Championship Sunday, where you're going to see an Atlanta versus Dallas, or you're going to see an Atlanta versus Florida. I would love to see London make it through. I want to see if they're capable of performing at that level. I really think that things are starting to go their way. Will New York, will OGLA come out and show that they deserve to be a little bit higher in everybody's power rankings? Who knows? So with that, thank you guys for tuning into another episode of Esports Analysis. If this is your first time checking out one of my videos, I put out brand new videos every single day covering the Call of Duty League. Any comments down below? What are you guys predicting? What do you think is going to happen? Let me know. Love the interactions, hearing how your guys' predictions might differ from mine. Leave a like before you head on the way. It really helps out the channel. With that, guys, thank you so much. I will catch you in tomorrow's upload.